Welcome to a brand new podcast series on coaching tools and approaches, brought to you by the Association for Coaching, the world's leading international professional body, which is advancing coaching in business and society worldwide. I'm your host, Claudia, coach and entrepreneur and co-founder of The Growing Coaches. Research shows that certain approaches can be effective. However, it also shows that integrating more than one approach can be even more effective. I will be in conversation with experts and look in more detail at some of these approaches, what the research says, how coaches can apply this in their practice, as well as some live demos to understand better how the approach is put into practice. Our aim in this series is to bring you closer to the research and information on a variety of approaches that you might like to put into practice. Welcome to Joe Oliver, Associate Professor at UCL, author, coach, and therapist. He specializes in mindfulness and acceptance and commitment coaching. Joe, can you tell the audience a bit more about yourself?
Well, thanks very much for having me on, first of all, and thank you to everyone listening. It's great to be here. So, yes, I'm very interested in ACT, as it's known as, various different names, acceptance and commitment coaching, or therapy, or sometimes contextual behavioral coaching. So there's a variety of different names. I can unpack those as we go. But those key points you can hear, the acceptance and the commitment bit are really two vital parts of the model. This idea of acceptance, this sort of allowing and making room for and acknowledging our internal experiences, and alongside that, this commitment piece, helping people to commit and move forward in a chosen way. And that's something I've been very interested in for a long time throughout my career. My career has sort of been a bit of a winding path. I think probably most people's careers are these days. I trained as a clinical psychologist in New Zealand a long time ago. And for a long time, I've also been interested in the workplace and people at work, people doing workplace things. And my PhD was, in fact, in occupational stress. And so that's been a sort of a thread that's been in the tapestry of my career, an interest in that. Kept my interest in coaching and applied to the workplace and sort of the variety of different things that people do. So I find myself in this odd position of working at a university, running a suite of postgraduate training programs, and also run a business in a consultancy that looks at doing training, principally in ACT. And I offer training or host trainings, and we provide coaching and therapy, and also supervision too, broadly with the idea of promoting and developing ACT ideas and helping people grow and learn, know more about ACT. So that's I guess where I'm up to in a nutshell in my career.
Thank you for that. Well, a long way from New Zealand now. I'm thinking of New Zealand and wondering. I love that side of the world, and I always tell my husband I want to end up there. So
right.
Looking for it, but that's on another note. Questions outside the podcast on what brought you to this side of the world. Business coaching and stress. Wow, those are useful, very useful topics. It sounds all an amazing journey. I was wondering if you could tell the audience a bit more in detail about the ACT approach and, what are the characteristics? How do you recognize that someone is using ACT in their coaching?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's an ACT as an acronym. The set is ACT, A-C-T, and the T stands for therapy, which is a nod towards the fact that this was originally developed within a therapeutic setting. So developed principally by people working with mental health issues or distress, as a lot of therapeutic approaches are. Cognitive behavioral therapy but then people quickly realized the benefits of ACT and have broadened it out. There's a really good reason ACT particularly has broadened out. I'll come to in a second. The model is largely looking at developing and fostering this concept called psychological flexibility. And there are a number of separate processes that do that. And psychological flexibility is that ability to be agile, to be flexible, and in response to either internal experiences, difficult, painful, or big thoughts or feelings, or of course external events as well, but to respond to those with flexibility. So rather than perhaps the thing we do on automatic pilot, say for example, if we get really stressed, If I get really stressed, the thing I often would do is panic, or I worry a lot, or I might avoid or work really hard. I might kind of get very rigid in my approach, or very narrow. Like the kind of things I do would be typically very just predictable. An ACT model would be helping me to respond more flexibly, psychologically flexibly, so that I could do some more interesting or helpful things in response to, say, something like stress. And those could include things that are useful to me. For me personally, it's not spending all my time worrying. It's not avoiding. It's doing a couple of key things, like usually getting on with the tasks at hand, doing good self-care, looking after myself, being kind to myself. These are personally things are good in my psychological flexibility repertoire. Think where I essentially slow down, step out of automatic pilot, don't let the thoughts or feelings that are there over-influence what I do, and I connect into my values, and I use those as a guide for my behavior rather than just whatever thoughts or feelings show up. So within there, you can hear me talking about a few different processes, which is, if the ACT model could be clustered into 3 principal processes, helping people to become aware, mindfully aware, helping them to build some observational distance to thoughts and feelings, and helping them to connect into values and their behavior to be guided by their values and taking valued actions. And those are the sort of key parts of the ACT model.
Sounds great. Thank you for that. For the listeners, Joe has some great videos in his profile. It made me think while you were talking about, when you were saying observational distance, basically the glasses metaphor. I'm not sure if you want to share that with the audience here.
Okay, yeah, that's one we've just recently done. This is a nice metaphor. If people could see us now, which you can't do on a podcast, you would see we're both wearing glasses. How convenient. So if you do wear glasses, there's a couple of variations to this, but it's a really nice one. So that key thing about observational distance, if we get a view on our thoughts, gosh, we're in such a better position to be more flexible. And I would say that a lot of the time when we get stuck or rigid is when we just don't observe our thinking. We just don't even notice the degree of influence it has over us. So the metaphor is like thoughts can be a bit like having really, really light, transparent, just about invisible glasses that you sort of pop on and you just forget they're there. Just like glasses, they influence what you see, they change it. Sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's not. The key then, of course, is to be able to notice that we have this thing that's affecting our vision, because that might be useful to us. Sometimes we want our glasses, sometimes we don't. And it's just like thoughts. We want to remember that our thoughts are here. And so if I were to take my glasses off like now, then I could hold them out in front of me and go, I'm wearing glasses. Isn't that interesting? I could look at them and get a unique perspective on them and say, oh, look at that. I could see a different angle on these glasses. And I could ask myself questions like, with this distance, is this particular thought useful for me in this instance? Is this helping me live my life as I choose? And great, if that's the case, then that's useful. Or I might find, actually, as I look at the thoughts, I think, actually, that's not so useful. This isn't helping me move forward. I perhaps might want to not engage with that thought, or set it aside, or just allow it to be there. But I get to choose in terms of how I respond. Not that the thought's necessarily bad, just that it might not be useful or the particularly helpful tool for this instance. So a great metaphor for those of us that wear glasses. There we go.
I found that a great metaphor. I hope the audience does too. So those 3 principles will lead us in the way then: awareness, observational distance, and values. You mentioned also about CBC and how there is certain influence from other approaches. I was wondering if we see it as a family, and who are the closest cousins of ACT?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a family is a nice metaphor. I like that idea because when we acknowledge that all these approaches are related, we acknowledge the history and the developmental history of these. And it also helps us to, as we focus on the differences, to acknowledge the similarities too, even to approaches that might be really, really different as we kind of track back in history. So the kind of common approaches that you would hear, so CBC, there's the cognitive bit and the behavioral bit. So those are 2 really key pieces. And if you go back far enough, it's the behavioral bit is one of the early origins. So back in the 1950s or so, when behaviorism was big. Some would argue, and I'm probably one of those people, that actually behaviorism is still really big. And when you look around at approaches like I don't know, like nudge theory. You look at Facebook and all those little, or Instagram, those little red kind of dots, or the +1, +2, or you've got so many messages. The sort of the appetitive appeal of those things. Or you look at Netflix, which says things like it just allows the Netflix program just to keep rolling on without stopping. It just you can stop it if you want, but it knows kind of behavioral theory. So it's the same with training kids, training dogs, right? It's big out there. So those are early origins of behaviorism. And of course, one of the early things about behaviorism was, in some ways, struggled a bit to articulate a solid, comprehensive theory to manage and address thinking, cognition, mind stuff. And so out of that then sprang cognitive theories, which have been hugely influential, hugely beneficial. It's just been, such a powerful impact on, and in terms of all approaches working with human behavior. You could sort of say like a third evolution, maybe not evolution, I guess evolution builds upon a third wave of approaches that have looked at alternative ways of being with thoughts and emotions, especially things that promote mindfulness and promote acceptance. So ACT is very much positioned within the behavioral tradition. It's also very interested in cognition and thinking and beliefs and all those things, but it's also interested in a way of being with those experiences flexibly that perhaps doesn't always mean necessarily not having, changing, getting rid of, but responding and changing the relationship to those internal experiences would be a hallmark feature. I mean, arguably some people would say that, of course, all of these approaches are interested in that to some degree, and maybe you step back far enough and you say, is there really a difference? It's sometimes hard to say. Of course, there are differences, and those are important differences, and there's a lot of commonality in these approaches too. So yeah, family is a really nice metaphor to describe these cluster of approaches. I like that.
Thank you for that description of the history, a bit of the background of ACT. In terms of research, can you tell us a bit more about the research that sits behind this approach, and why should coaches care about this?
Yeah, it's a nice question, because it's a really important one. Coaches, in my experience, we're interested in research. We want to know the things that we do, that they work, and that there's an evidence base underpinning them. Coaching is the newer kid on the block, and the research, of course, is developing and emerging, and in terms of across the different approaches. So within ACT, there's a really broad evidence base that's developing really, really quickly. A really hallmark feature of the ACT community is a strong dedication and interest in research. Myself and a colleague wrote a book on ACT coaching, acceptance and commitment coaching, and I was looking back, and it was a few years ago, and there was at that point we said there was 200 randomized controlled trials looking at the model. And at that point it was very exciting. 200, wow, that's a big number, and that was written in 2016. We're now at the point, as of just of this year, a couple of weeks ago, the number of randomized controlled trials has reached 1,000. So within that short space of time, that number has been reached, which points towards this kind of exponential growth in the number of research trials that are there. Which, RCTs, that's one way to look at, does an approach work? And it's certainly a really useful one. It's a rigorous one, and it's definitely a key part of the picture. But there are other ways to evaluate evidence, of course. One of the things that does tell us is that ACT works across a broad range of settings. For example, common mental health issues, serious mental health issues, but also other things as well, like smoking cessation, or kids developing resilience in school, or parents dealing with little ones with really serious health concerns, or athletes, or high performers, or people working in banking settings. There's a whole wide range of these trials suggesting this approach really works, which is really useful for coaches for a couple of reasons. One, it's great to say, here's a well-articulated, theoretical-driven approach that's evidence-based, great. But also the diversity, the versatility of this model is also really important. So that, I think in coaching, we're constantly meeting new and different issues and problems, and people turning up with all sorts of things going on. So we don't need evidence to say every kind of single one of those things has been shown to work, but we can look at the fundamental underpinning processes, and we can be confident that the model can be applied in a variety of different settings. So one of the other interesting parts of the ACT approach is that it looks also to set out, not does it work? That's a good question, right? Of course, right? That's a good place to start. Second question is then, the scientists in us want to then ask, well, how does it work? Because if we can nail that down, then we're going to do much better at figuring out the places where it doesn't work and adapting and improving, and then tweaking our model so we can be more targeted and efficient. So there's a lot of time and energy has been devoted to figuring out, like, does the model work in the way we'd expect it to? Like, we have an intervention of some sort, and does it affect things like the variables I said before, psychological flexibility, and does that impact on the outcome? And so there's now a really good body of research that suggests that it does work in that way. ACT approaches do impact on psychological flexibility, and that has all sorts of ongoing positive benefits. Well-being, for example, improved performance, improved health, all these different things that we're really, really interested in.
So now that we know that it works, you mentioned there the key, which is how does it work? And I guess in the podcast, we'll do this through a demo that you will be able to show us how it works.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah.
So coaching topic.
Yep.
It has to do with well-being and positive emotions. So when I go on holiday and I have to come back, I usually feel a very big down on the day that I'm traveling back. It's usually a lost day because of the feeling, a feeling of low. It's historical. So when I think of my life, I say, I was happy when I left, and I'm happy the next day. It's just that specific day that I struggle with, and so I'm trying to think, if I manage to solve that and not go through that day in that way, or go through that day in a better way, then I've almost sometimes joked, is it worth it going away on a trip if I know I'm going to struggle when I come back with the coming back itself? Yeah, it's a weird one because I don't feel like when I come back, once I'm back, and when I left, I was happy. So it's not, things were fine. So then there is that wonder of why that deep, low emotion on. I used to blame it on travel itself, but I get it more when I'm coming back than when I'm leaving. When I used to work as a consultant, traveling became almost like a transaction. And, there were processes, and it was very, that stress. You don't even arrive to the airport so long in advance. It's very transactional. I would still have, on the day coming back from my project to my station or wherever I was going, I always had, that day was a struggle. So either finding a good book, finding strategies I've always had to find good strategies for that day. Yep. And now when we are on family holidays, it's even more difficult because I have the kids. And so it's not like I can be in that way around them. Or they also have their own feelings, I guess. And so managing their feelings rather than mine. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You've got other people to take care of and attend to. Yeah. Oh, thanks. That's a really nice example. And it's, I'm sure like everyone listening here is just going to go, yep, I know exactly what you mean, in the sense that it's a really common experience. I certainly put my hand up and say that I have my own version of that feeling of coming back and that thing that comes up on that travel day. Let me ask some questions, and of course, here's the opportunity to talk through some of these ACT processes live, and people can get to hear it, and we can sort of see it happening live, perhaps. But also, my main goal is that this little interaction we'll have will be hopefully helpful for you in some way. Added bonus if the people listening can get something out of this too. Good stuff. Well, I'm going to ask a couple of questions and just sort of maybe see if I can sort of go through this, and they'll be ACT flavored, and as we go. And I might just sort of occasionally step out if that's okay, and just sort of talk to what I'm doing or why I'm asking it. You heard me there at the start talk about this psychological flexibility. So I'm always interested in when something like this comes up, which is big, right? It's not I can hear this sort of, that the bigness come from like those wonderings you have, like just about, occasionally, like, is it even worth it going on holiday for this feeling that comes up? Like, this is on that day, at least, it's a big thing that happens. And I'm always interested in what happens when those things come up and how we respond, particularly those sort of automatic pilot responses just that kind of happen to us without even thinking. Before we dive into that, though, can I just get eyes on the thing that happens, the sort of the bigness? And it's, I think I just, as you were talking, I wrote down words like feeling like a downness, a big downness, and a feeling low. Is that kind of part of it? Did I get that?
Yeah. So there's something big with the feelings on the feeling side. So it is a bit of a sunk. Usually energetic, I have vitality and those things, and there is that feeling of heavy, sad, and down.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So yeah, I kind of get a feeling of, I get a sort of sense that sunk and low energy, heavy and sad. And is there, usually when I experience kind of stuff like that, I have a lot of mind stuff going as well, and you can see my hand next to me and sort of mind chatter. Do you experience that? Like, is there mind stuff going on? Do you find yourself, is there themes that you would be saying to yourself in this context?
I usually try to think on the week ahead. So try to look at my schedule for the next days and, is there a reason to be stressed? Is there a reason to feel anxiety? Because I guess there is anxiety as well related to it. Yeah. So usually...
Can I ask, is that you're sort of looking ahead, just trying to figure it out? Like, why? Why is this happening?
Why am I feeling like this? Right. Why am I... suddenly worrying? Is there a reason to worry?
Right.
Or I guess trying to see, is it worry that is in there, in that sadness or that anxiety?
Yeah. Do you ever get the answer to that? Like, does you ever go, oh, that's why? Okay, fine.
No, because usually it's whatever I have ahead of me is something I can control, or is something that it's things I've been doing, or things that I don't think I would. There was a time in my life where, of course, exams in the UK are after holidays, which is the worst system ever.
Absolutely.
I've never understood that. In that case, of course, then you're worrying about the exams. So worry could have been one of the reasons why that was mixed in that bubble. But I don't think worry is all of it.
So you look ahead in your schedule and it doesn't account for it. The thing's there, but you're like, I can deal with these. These are familiar. It doesn't account for this feeling. So you're sort of left with, so you're trying to reason or figure it out. Like, that doesn't kind of help. Okay, so you're sort of left with a question mark there. What else? What else? Any other kind of themes that are going with it, or?
Well, sadness. Yeah. So there is a feeling of sadness, and then I'm thinking, if that were the case, it means I'm leaving someone behind or something. So then, what am I leaving behind? And so, in some cases, it's like, okay, my family's coming with me. So it's not even, in some, again, going back to university, I was saying bye to family, friends, etc. I was studying abroad. So there, you're saying bye to something. Yeah. So there, could the sadness be because of who you're saying bye to? Yeah. But it happens as well nowadays. For example, it happens as well in family holidays where I go to Wales, for example, or I go on a road trip, and then I'll come back and I'll have... the same 4 people who left are coming back, and I'm still having that feeling of. So then I've also started on picking, if I'm on a road trip and I went to a cabin in the middle of nowhere, could it be that there's something about being in a cabin that I will miss, or that I feel sad out, and then there comes this other voice that says, if that were the case, it would only happen in this trip, with this trip. It doesn't happen only with this trip. It happens with every trip.
Right,
so,
okay, yeah.
So then, yes, for example, in this last one where we went away, I did say to my husband, maybe we should look somewhere around near where we live, where we can sometimes take off on a weekend and have like a cabin vacation type of thing, cabin weekend. Yeah. To get this outdoor, being more outdoors, less of regular life. So there is that thinking of, could it be that I'm leaving something behind, which I'm not sure.
It's a mystery, huh?
It takes me to a good place because I reflect on things that I want on my life. Yeah. But I don't think that it is that.
Okay. Yeah. So I just said before, it's a mystery. I don't know if you find this. I find, mysteries are so tantalizing. I want to figure them out. I want to kind of understand and unpick them. Okay. Can I make an observation? I don't know how it sort of sits. I mean, again, like personally, when I'm sort of stuck with a mystery or particularly like a big experience, I think I might do a little bit of what you do, like which is to try and understand it or unpick it, or which is who doesn't do that? That feels like a very reasonable, rational response to do, like a good thing to do. Trying to kind of to figure this through and kind of navigate a kind of path through this. Claudia, can I ask, are there other things that you do when this thing comes up, like this feeling, like it sounds so there's one is kind of like is looking for a reason, why am I feeling this, what's happening, so that low energy, heavy, sad. And you mentioned one of the things you used to do before kids was get a book, or another thing you used to do was like look ahead and sort of figure out what's happening there. Are there any other things you might do?
Yeah, so powering through the day. So basically very task-oriented. I become very task-oriented. So we need to be there. We need to do this. We need to leave by this time. We need to have snacks. We need to stop. So very much thinking of tasks. I tend to look for what I'm doing while I'm going to be traveling. So if, will I be listening, if it's driving, then will I be listening to an audiobook? Will it be a podcast? Or if I'm in a flight, will I watch movies, or will I work through something? Or, what is it that I will be doing during the time that I am traveling? Okay,
right. So it's sort of in response to that feeling, like kind of planning, thinking ahead, being kind of, what did you say? Powering through. I like that. It's a nice phrase. Yeah. Okay. So I got that. Can I, another question I had, like, do you have a sense that those, like, how well do those strategies work?
Well, what came to mind, of course, because I have the ACT model in my head, is mindfulness. And the fact that I am probably not in the present moment at all while all of this is happening. Okay. In the sense of, I'm planning ahead. This is what needs to be done. This is what needs to happen. I guess the thing that brings me to the present moment would be once I'm listening to the audiobook or once I'm doing, but being in the present moment is painful.
Okay, right. Yeah,
so that's why I don't want to be in the present moment. It's like I want to fast forward that day in my life.
Just lean into that a little bit. That it's being in the. Can you say that again? Being in the present moment is painful. How so?
On that day, being in the present moment is painful.
Yeah. On that day, absolutely.
On that day. And that's why it bothers me, because the day before I'm fine. I can be in the present moment, and the day after I can be in the present moment. And sometimes the day after it takes a little bit. It's not that it finishes it can drag a little bit on both sides, but usually I go for a run, and that's like a switch of, okay, fine. That sort of sets the trajectory again towards my usual self.
So there's part of the mystery there, is that this is just a thing that happens on that particular day. This isn't something that happens outside of that, before or after. So that's part of that mystery. But on that particular day, being in the present moment, there's something that's painful about it. If you're like me, and probably like most reasonable people on the planet, we'll do everything we can to avoid pain, because it's by definition painful, right? It doesn't feel easy to sit with. Can you just tell me a little bit about just as we sort of sit with it now, what's it like to anticipate it or feel it, or what's the sort of sense of that thing like?
I had never thought actually that I had thought about emotions and thoughts and all everything else that I've learned in my coaching, so to say. But I had not thought about that specific being present and rather than being in the future. And when I think there is that fear of being in the present on that day, what to do? Does it mean, do I sit down and cry and and let it out, or does it mean which I've in certain trips I have if bringing in memory. There have been certain trips where I've been a bit more. I've spoken about it with my husband, like kids sleeping on the back in the car, and then I can sort of say, "Oh, I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling like this." But it's in that occasion where I did it. It's not that it helped massively. That I could say, oh, after I did that, everything else changed.
Yeah. There's something that's...
I still have...
Okay, so it's still there, right? It didn't kind of like magic it away. It's interesting. But it sounds a little different to that. But I just heard what you said, like there was a bit of... When I was asking, like, what's the prospect of being in the present with that feeling? It was a bit like, well, what do I do with it? Or do I sit and cry? It feels a bit... Or even you sort of said, I think you used the words, a bit of fear around it. Like, what would it be actually like to sit with this feeling?
I think there isn't a justification for this.
Yeah.
Almost like if something happens and I'm sad, then, I'll go through the motions and feel sad and watch, go eat something, do whatever it is that on that day feels the right thing. But talk about it, be for friends, etc. But with this, it's like there's no justification for it.
Yeah.
So what am I going to sit and cry about? Or what am I going to... Got it. And I guess you said you felt it. And that was actually quite a surprise. My husband doesn't go through this. So, so for me, it's like, why do I go through this?
Yeah. So I can hear there's sort of... I'm going to sort of describe it like a stickiness with the mystery. Like the stickiness, it's like feels it says grab it, pull it, kind of gets you stuck. And I totally get that because for me, I hate mysteries. I've got to have the answer. I don't know who did it. Why is this happening to me? And I can hear that it's sort of making it a little harder to do that thing of, I don't know. I'm going to ask in a second what that thing might be, but rather than, I guess it's being in the present. Or it's perhaps doing something different to what you might normally automatically do. And there's nothing wrong with any of the things you've said so far. They sound completely reasonable to me. The kind of things, exactly the things I would do. It's just that it doesn't seem to have kind of moved you forward with this. It sort of has got you a bit of a circle and a loop, and it sounds like it could be a justification or a rationale for adding something new in. So I wondered, let me ask you this question. This is a values kind of question, right? Which is, rather than the automatic habits determining what you do, or just the feeling or the fear or there's no rationale for this. If you were, Claudia, like being present and you were choosing it and you were like, this is how I want to be. I get to decide. This is how I want to be when sadness shows up. I wonder and if I was watching you, maybe if I could, be fly on the wall watching you do that, like you being in charge, hands on the wheel, deciding where you want to go, what kind of things might I see you do if you were choosing how you be with this feeling?
It brought me a bit to my future self, because my future self is more of a calm, welcoming, in the present person than my current self. And so she even dresses differently. So when I thought of how would I want to be on that day, almost like that future self, can she do that
right.
for me?
Yeah, that's a cool way to look at it. How does she do it? So let me just kind of rephrase it. So how does your future self deal with this mystery feeling? She doesn't know the answer. She doesn't know why it's there. There's no justification for this feeling. It just is. How does she deal with it? What does she do?
More acceptance. So more, as you mentioned, my current self sees a problem and wants to fix it. I guess my future self is just there. And so the question would be in accepting, as in not trying to change it, not trying to... I am reading a book, and it made me also think of the book of how some people can just accept their faith, or in the book it's someone who goes to prison, and this person has an acceptance to being in prison that I at the time questioned, could I have that? Could I just simply accept that I'm in prison, and so the question is, and it's very drastic because it's a prison, and I'm talking about coming back from a trip, but the question is, could I just deal with it? I guess I deal with it every time.
Yeah.
But I don't feel I can deal with it.
Yeah.
So I feel it's a struggle to deal with it.
Yeah.
With that feeling. Because on no other context do I have that feeling?
That's part of the mystery.
Without a justification.
Yeah, absolutely.
As a mystery.
Yeah. It's a nice way to capture it. So I can hear you, your future self could be with this thing experienced differently. And we use that word acceptance. But what I hear you saying is not an acceptance. She wouldn't do like just passive resignation. Oh, I give up. I can't do anything. It's something kind of different here that you're tapping into, which is, it's kind of nearly like a making peace. It's like a leaning in. There's something quite active about how she is with this feeling. If people could see me, they'd just about see my arms moving out and around, like, what's the word? Embracing of, because it's kind of the qualities that I hear you saying. And I wonder, that feels very different to a place of fixing or getting rid of or dealing with in that way. Not that there's anything wrong with those, but this that you're describing here feels different.
So embracing sounds like a good one. And what I think is almost like hugging, but I still don't know how to do that. I don't know how to hug that feeling, how to embrace that feeling. I don't know how to live with that feeling. It's because it's not a feeling that I have on my daily life.
Yeah.
So it's, there's a trust that it will go away. So, or a hope that it will go away. So there is, but I guess there's that fear. Will it not go away?
Yeah. So that's true, right? It's like, it strikes me, if you were to do something, you sort of wouldn't want to enter into this with a kind of like, I'm going to do this, but you're going to go away, that kind of deal, right? That would be a bit disingenuous. But I can see, of course, you don't want to just be stuck with this feeling. You want it to move and flow and have new things happen and have new learnings from this. Like, for it to be a curious process. Can I just ask a question? Like, I wonder if that feeling was here now, and just say it had a voice, and it was able to kind of speak to what it sort of sensed about this idea of it being embraced and being listened to. What do you think it might say?
So the feeling is here, but it's in my chest, and it's round and compact.
Okay. Yeah.
And what I wish is that it could somehow uncompact itself and come out in the same way air comes out.
Okay. Yeah.
And as I said that, it did feel lighter on the inside as well.
Interesting.
If the feeling could say something, I have no idea what it would say. And I guess that's again a frustration.
Yeah. Let me ask you specifically then. Like, it doesn't have to come with a big answer. What's its kind of, it's not a technical term, what's its vibe towards the idea of you sort of talking about your future self embracing it? Does it kind of like that or not like that?
Oh, no, it likes that,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. So something that kind of appeals to it. And there's a bit of a kind of little lightning where you kind of talk about this idea of kind of it coming out and unpacking, and rather than kind of being dense and tight, there could be a place or a context where it could have a bit more space to breathe and maybe even be.
I guess what comes to me is in that moment of it being is the thought that's connected to that is the fear of it staying.
Got it. Absolutely. Yeah.
And the second I then think of it hasn't stayed in the past, that sort of allows me to be with it a bit more.
Okay. Yeah. So notice that, like, right, like a bit of, perhaps even a lot of how you respond to this feeling is driven by that fear. What if it stays? If it stays, I've got to do something. I've got to take care of this. I've got to fix it. And there's a lot of automaticity that comes up when that fear drives things. Like, what if here, the new and different thing is, rather than the fear doing the determining about what you do, it's something else. When you tap in and go, okay, fear's there, get it, understand it, it's big and scary, and I want to choose and I want to decide how I do this. Like, I want to have a say about how I respond to this feeling, which could include questions like, how would my future self respond? What would she do? If I was to open up to this, what might happen? If I was to listen to this feeling, what kind of comes from that? So rather than the feeling doing the determining, it's you, Claudia, doing the choosing. You decide how you are with this feeling. And I sense that would be different.
Yeah.
There's a big sigh there as you say that. What's going through your mind at that point?
My future self, and I'm actually just imagining my future self interacting with this feeling.
It's kind of like a thank you, like a gratitude nearly. I don't know. That's sort of in that gesture of hands together.
I guess that's what she would do with it.
You're right. Wow, that's a lot of, it feels, there's a lot of strength in that, or wisdom in that. But part of me goes, and I hope I would be able to do the same thing when I experience that feeling. Those feelings, from my personal experience, are hard and big and difficult. And I get easily pulled into that swamp and stickiness of just doing that. I can't deal with this. I don't want this feeling. I know we're kind of approaching the end here, but this part of me is always really practical. Like, I think, well, if there was like, wouldn't it be cool if there were like 1 or 2 or maybe 3 things you would do when the situation comes up, if we're like really kind of tie it together in a practical way. So next time you go on holiday, you're sort of thinking, right, okay, I'm ready to do something different. I've got 1, 2, 3 things I'm going to do differently, and I'm going to anticipate it. I'm going to get ready for it. I'm going to make a note, remind myself when that feeling's going to come up, and I'm going to be ready for it this time. What would those 1, 2, 3 different things from this conversation be, do you think?
So I can't help of thinking of the very practical one, which is not putting anything too stressful on that first week when I come back. The other one is how to, in that day, focus on being more present on that day. And I guess looking at it, I would need to look into what would that take, but a bit of an approach from every day into that day, rather than the powering through tasks, savoring breakfast, enjoying the breakfast, rather than rushing through it because it's the next thing. I usually start my day with a breakfast I enjoy. I enjoy drinking coffee. But if I think of the coffees I drink during my trips, the day of the trip, I don't enjoy it. It's not a coffee I will enjoy. So how do I bring the savoring side of a normal day into that day? And I guess the other one would be to tap into my future self. So when dealing specifically with emotion, so what would she do with emotion? So when I think of that ball in my chest, compacted, what would she do with it? And for some reason, she feels stronger to deal with that emotion itself. It still surprises me how the way I can deal with a normal setback or a normal sad news or something like that is completely different to just because this feeling doesn't have a justification in my mind.
That bit kind of has a stickiness there, right? It doesn't sort of allow you to do what you'd normally do, that nice repertoire you'd otherwise have. That stickiness sort of gets you, can't have it. So that's a nice piece of this puzzle. I wonder what it is that makes that so sticky. But I guess what I hear is that it is sticky, and that doesn't allow you to just intuitively tap into that really nice wisdom you otherwise apply into this place. It just pulls you in an automatic place. But that thing, it's such a nice question. It's like, what would my future self do? Awesome. How would she respond to this feeling? It opens up something really cool and different and new. Wow. Okay. Well, I hope that's been useful. Thank you for sharing that example. It's like, it's as we've been talking, of course, I've been thinking so much about my own process with this stuff, and those kind of places that I get stuck. And I remember back in my 20s thinking, psychology is going to help me deal with this. And, here I am, 48, 47. It's like, oh, nope, it's just the same things. Just got to keep remembering not to get stuck.
Thank you for that. I guess it would be nice for the audience to hear a bit of your internal thinking in terms of how to approach this from an ACT perspective. Great. For example, I know that what triggered my future self was when you asked me about values, and that took me to spirituality. And that was what took me to my future self. So there, I could see that you were introducing values, which you had mentioned to us previously. But what else can you tell the audience about your process when coaching with ACT?
Okay, I'll dive into that. Is anything, just as we finish though and we step out, that you wanted to add in from your own observations or at this point?
I guess that's more or less what I mentioned before. It's that the justification of a feeling. So if I am feeling sad because something happened, then I am justified to feel sad, and then I allow myself to go through the motions. so to say. Whereas if I feel sad because I'm going back home and there's no justification to feeling sad, and I guess that's what I was trying to look for, that justification. Is it because I'm stressed? Is it because I'm leaving something behind? Is it because something that I was here, I don't have at home and I want to have it? And I was looking for that justification. And so I guess when you also mentioned that you also have it, it made me feel a bit more justified, as in it happens to other people. It's okay to feel this way, and then that allows me to sit with the fact that it's okay, allows me to sit with the feeling and allow my future self to help me deal with it, while also doing other techniques to go through it. So it was a lovely process, and thank you.
Okay, welcome. That's a really beautiful summary there. Yeah, that's captures kind of a lot of the kind of key things that I was thinking and just watching as we're going through things. In terms of, I guess, a little bit behind the curtain, one of the things I have in mind in doing ACT is the psychological flexibility. So where I'm interested in the places where we get rigid, and it's like a sort of a knot forms, and what is the knot and what's contributing to it, and what processes need to be applied to sort of, you could say, massage out and get things moving again. Sometimes I often think of like a river flowing, and a dam builds up and dams things up, and one just kind of move that through and get the emotion flowing again, or the processes moving. You talked really, really eloquently there about that emotional experience, and so I was listening out for if there are the knots that make it harder for that to move through. And it's, as you said, it seemed like the justification was a key kind of knot or stickiness. I could feel for me, and I think it was my own problem-solving mind and my own how I would deal with it. I kind of wanted to go into, I wonder why that is. Why does that happen? Is it because of past experiences? Is it because of feelings as associated? Blah, 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 blah. And I could feel, but perhaps that wasn't as much as my mind wanted to go there to figure it out, that wasn't the helpful thing to do, because going too much further into where that mindy, knotty stuff, and ACT would call that fusion, might kind of further add more stickiness or more fusion to that thought process, which is, I can only respond in the way I choose to emotion when I understand it. And if we went further down the rabbit hole of understanding, we might have kind of got ourselves lost. Not to say that understanding won't be important. Maybe it probably will be important later on to why this happens, but just in that initial instance. Because what I really wanted to hear was, rather than that knotty, mindy stuff telling you how you have to deal with this feeling, I was really curious about how you would want to deal with it if you chose. And you really quickly intuited like a nice way that was, that your future self was a beautiful way to bring a whole lot of new responding to that situation in really, really quickly. And it was such a nice metaphor. And opened up a lot of really new possibilities, which is, I guess broadly, I was thinking of it, if one way of responding to the situation was stickiness, what would allow for openness, new flow through, in that there was values driven, values chosen, and that was a really nice piece. And there's something about kind of thinking about the future. What would my future self do that just opens up those possibilities that maybe don't feel quite so available when I'm feeling stuck and rigid? And then I could hear you then. That was a really nice example of psychological flexibility. Like, I could accept it, or I could be in the present with it, or I could just be okay with it. It seemed to make a really big difference. So in that reflection, Joe, you mentioned fusion with thoughts, and the fact that you were tempted to go into, what thoughts might I be fused to. And of course, ACT, one of the things that to have psychological flexibility, you also need to have certain diffusion from your thoughts. Can you explain that more so that the audience gets a better understanding of diffusion? So it's a concept, and it relates back to that glasses metaphor we did before. It's a made-up word, diffusion, which is the opposite to fusion, which is metaphorically we become blended together with our thoughts. So the part of ourselves that can choose within the ACT model there's no separation with our thoughts. So whatever just thought pops up in a particular given moment, that becomes the thing that says, this is how it is. Or like the glasses, I don't even notice they are. This is scary. I can't have this. I must understand and reason this before I can accept this. Which maybe will be true, but it might not be true as well. So defusion, taking the glasses off, it's not about getting rid of the thoughts or proving them right or wrong. It's just simply having some space from them so I can observe them and notice them and ask myself interesting questions like, is this workable to me? Is this helping me achieve be the kind of person I want to be? And if it's not, then I might say, well, I just want to hold this thought lightly, i.e. be defused from it, so that I can have some more space to ask myself, well, what do I choose to do in this situation? So for you, I was hearing like the fusion was, I must understand before I can do anything with this emotion. And you did a really nice thing of defusing, having some space from that, and then from there some a values question could come up that was connected to acceptance or willingness to maybe even lean into potentially quite a big, not easy to be with emotion. Nice
to hear that other approach. Thank you for that. Well, with that, we'll close the demo and move to another topic which is very relevant at the moment, which is, of course, technology. And technology is impacting coaching a lot. And so the question is, how does technology impact, benefit, hinder, act?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so... By technology, like there's so many different ways, but obviously this is sort of pandemic thing we've been through, and here we are using technology in very different ways. I personally find online environments really productive environments. I find them really useful, and I appreciate those places to be in, just because of geography and reach and all those things. I also am aware that's not for everyone. There's some people that find it really difficult, and some people have different ways of interacting with people that mean the live 3D-ness of a person is really, really important. So, as with everything, having availability and choice when it comes to things like using technology is super important. I'm also interested in the research. What does the research say? Broadly, the research suggests that online environments are good places for learning, teaching, therapy, and coaching. And again, not to say that's for everyone, but that online environments have been demonstrated to be effective and useful still. There's something definitely different, and thinking about that demonstration and about how you responded to that piece about when I said, hey, that's something I experience, which is a little bit like that kind of connection thing too. Like, I'm not the only one. It's such an important part, I think, for anything. So technology, I think, sometimes some people can get in the way of that ability to be in the room and connect with another person. That human connection is super important. I think we are changing and adapting to this environment really, really quickly, and it's been thrown upon us much quicker than we anticipated. So we're not up to speed yet. We've got kind of hundreds of thousands of years of evolution pushing us in a certain direction, and we've got a couple of years or so of this new environment. So, the things like sound and two-dimensionality, eye contact, turn taking when audio crosses each other are all things that get in the way of all that evolution so far. But I expect that technology will very quickly, with my expectation, very quickly adapt and adjust to these things. But also, human beings are pretty adaptive themselves. I expect us to, and we do really quickly adapt to these new environments. And like the eye contact thing is a really important one. I'm so now used to someone just looking slightly below the camera, my brain just interprets it that they're looking at me, and sometimes I find it hard to tell, are they looking at me or not? Like I'm less disturbed by that. I remember the very first Skype sessions, I was just like weirded out by someone not looking at me. I just couldn't get my head around it. I try and stare at the camera, but it's just now for me, and I think for a lot of people, no longer important. So we adapt and we adjust, but that needs to be caveated by the fact that we can't take it for granted. We've got this, as I say, these hundreds of thousands of years of evolution behind us, that we need to remember that and make sure that we don't forget the importance of that face-to-face. So either that we continue to do that in some ways, or we look to try and replicate that as best as we can where we can't.
In terms of virtual reality and chatbots being used out there, have you seen any applications with ACT that you feel worth mentioning to the audience?
Not specifically in the terms of VR with ACT, but I can see, gosh, it's going to come thick and fast, undoubtedly. I don't think. I mean, I can see there's research trials that have looked at a variety of different clinical scenarios where therapeutic scenarios for helping people manage and practice new and different behaviors that you can't really do in real life very easily. And that's just so super important, because I feel like ACT coaching in general is about practicing new behaviors, trying out new things. And sometimes those new things are scary. Like, for example, I don't know, working with people who have a fear of public speaking. I can see the application for VR just being enormous, like popping someone into a hyper-realistic VR setting when they need to practice speaking, and then can practice psychological flexibility in that setting that's completely analogous to a real-life setting. That's amazing and fantastic. And chatbots, well, at the moment, I would say, of course, they're developing in their sophistication, but I could sort of see a future, and this is the kind of nerdy sci-fi part of me that comes out, where it's possible, I think, in a few decades, those chatbots will be sophisticated enough and have the amount of kind of AI and data available to them, enough to them, that they'll be able to predict with high accuracy a kind of thing that a coach might say that would be useful for this particular circumstance and context, so much so that we might not be able to detect the difference between a real coach and an AI coach. I mean, that's kind of scary, isn't it? Are we going to be out of a job? But no, we're not, right? I mean, I just think that'd be super cool, because the human element is going to be so important. But there's so many times where I feel like kind of light AI could be really, really important. Or I was speaking to someone at a conference last year, and they were suggesting what we might have is augmented coaching, whereby we have coaches and we have the AI there suggesting, here's some things you could say. Here's some things you've said in the past that have been really effective. Here's some things that from 100,000 other previous similar interactions have been shown and be evidence-based effectiveness that you could say in this situation. You have a little menu kind of pop up on your augmented reality glasses, and you go, I'm going to say that. Like, imagine that, like AI augmented coaching. That could be really cool.
Well, that's, sci-fi has really proven to be more of a predicting future in some cases. So, or showing us what could be.
Indeed.
And then us deciding what yes and no. So I definitely see that coming, or being useful, at least for practice and training, of course, of if I want to train myself in ACT more, then getting immediate feedback, as we know, that is helpful. And so it's giving us that. So yeah. In terms of groups and teams, so a lot of this is very personal. So if I think, that I had already had to share all of this in a podcast, working with teams, what's your take on ACT in teamwork?
I think it's super powerful. I think, not just ACT, of course, coaching in teams and working outside the individual is just so valuable. And for a couple of reasons. One, hearing the ways in which other people get stuck is really useful. There's that sort of universality of experience. Like, I'm not the only one. Great. Sitting in a team and hearing other people get stuck in similar ways can be extraordinarily powerful. That's one aspect of where we see, for example, interventions that are for increasing resilience, managing stress, increasing well-being, group interventions. A lot of the ACT research, in fact, is done with groups. And some of our studies that we've done ourselves in our research group have been with groups, and we've found that really, really useful. The data is really good, it's really powerful, and just that thing in a group of people just go, oh, you get this too? I thought I was the only one who kind of had a mind that really worried, or I was the only one who got overwhelmed with stress. It's so powerful. That kind of thing, like someone says, I tried out something new in the weekend and it really worked, and everyone else goes, oh, that sounds interesting. I could maybe do something like that too. That learning off each other. Because of course, human beings, we're such modelers, right? We love to model and imitate other people. We're so good at it. So it's really powerful to exploit that. And of course, the other thing too is, like, in terms of helping teams function better or work together better or increase their performance level, that having ways in which we can not only talk about things like shared goals, shared values, and commonality that are would be a really key integral part of a lot of team working interventions. That other piece too about thinking about the ways in which teams get themselves stuck when they respond on automatic pilot or respond to each other in perhaps unproductive or habitual stuck ways, and having a way to be able to for that team to be able to work together, see their own processes, for example, fusion and avoidance, and then come together and coalesce around values and values-based goals. It can be really, really powerful.
Thank you. Yeah, that brings it to life.
Okay.
One final question. What final thoughts would you like to leave the listeners with?
Well, I hope that this is perhaps, for those that hadn't heard of this, perhaps piqued curiosity. And I'm sure probably people listening who haven't heard would say that they'd recognize some pieces in their own work and their own practice, and perhaps might also notice some new things. I'm very encouraged by talking to people in the coaching world in terms of there's a real strong passion for approaches that work, that are evidence-based, that are going to be useful and helpful, and we're all on this journey together. So for me personally, I'm constantly learning off other colleagues. I'm really interested and curious about what other people are doing, and I feel that that's a really important part of us together, developing coaching technologies that are going to work better for our clients and organizations and teams. So I feel like this is a collective journey that we're walking on, and I would very much encourage that collectivism as we go forward, and address some of the kind of big questions, the science and the evidence and the what works and how it works questions together as we cooperate and as we go forward.
Where can the audience find you?
I am on Twitter, and the Twitter handles I think will be in the show notes, but at Context Consult. On Instagram, the videos that we referenced before, like short little snippets of demos, they're all on Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook. We're kind of all over social media, but LinkedIn is a good place to catch me, and on Instagram as well.
If the coaches listening there who want to hear more about ACT metaphors or ACT thoughts, the videos are great. They could also be very good with sending them to clients so that they learn a bit more about the concepts. Thank you for that, Joe. It was lovely to have a bit of a dive into ACT and learn a bit about it a bit more. I was especially keen on learning about how, and I didn't think I was going to get this from the episode, but basically the way you used values with this issue. And of course we learn values, and I've used values in my coaching, but it's that reminder of how powerful they can be and how to bring them into the practice, among other things. So thank you for that and for spending these hours with us today.
Very welcome. Yeah, I'm really pleased to have been here. It's been great talking to you, and I hope that's been useful. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode by the Association for Coaching. I have been Claudia Day. We hope this episode offers you some new insight and inspiration. For 20 years, our purpose has been to inspire and champion coaching excellence, advance the coaching profession, and make a sustainable difference to individuals, organizations, and society. To find out more about the AC and our member benefits, follow us on LinkedIn or explore our webpage at associationforcoaching.com. There, you can keep up to date with our latest episodes, enjoy the wealth of digital learning offerings, and gain insights from our Coaching Perspectives magazine.